Hey, what's up guys? Thanks for tuning in to another video. In this one I want to tell you guys about my experience being born into a cult and how it's affected my life. There are a lot of cult babies out there and hopefully this will help you feel less alone. And for all you normies out there, you get a little bit of a glimpse into what the cult life is all about. I was born into an end of days Christian cult called the Worldwide Church of God. It was led by this guy, Herbert Armstrong. He used various forms of media, radio, television, print, to speak to his large congregation that spread all across the world. He had a huge personality and he spoke with authority about some pretty terrifying stuff.
And all will appear before the judgment seat of Christ. And Christ the judge is going to pronounce sentence guilty. And the sentence is death.
Armstrong touted himself as the one true Messiah of God, and all the other churches were liars and sinners. If you observed Sunday instead of Saturday as a holy day, sinner. You celebrated holidays or birthdays, sinner. If you ate pork or seafood or any unclean meat, you would burn in hell for eternity. There were a lot of rules, but the fear of God that he instilled in us and the promise that we were the only ones who were going to make it to the new kingdom of heaven were enough motivation for us to uphold these rules. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole history of this man and his church, but it is super interesting stuff. So if you want to learn more about it, I'll link you guys to a documentary that you should really check out. This is more of a personal history of me and my family and how it affected us. The 70s were the peak of popularity for the WWCG. It spread all across the world, including here in Vancouver, which would become the Canadian headquarters for the church. And it's where my parents joined in 1974. My mother was living in Quebec at the time and searching for answers that she couldn't find through Catholicism, she discovered the Plain Truth magazine, a propaganda pamphlet created by the Worldwide Church of God to recruit members. And obviously it worked really well as she booked a flight and headed straight to Vancouver. When she arrived, right away she started to work for the church as a receptionist in their office. Shortly after she started there, she met my father. Of course, you could only marry within the church, so they got married in a hurry and this would prove to be a huge mistake, but we'll get into that later. To them, everything was normal. There was nothing culty going on at all. On the surface, it was just a church, but they had a leg up on all the other churches, and my parents felt privileged to be in the know. In the 80s, my parents started having children and everything is going smoothly for the family until Armstrong, who my father affectionately refers to as the old man, dies in 1986. This causes a huge disruption. It went against everything the cult had taught us. The day of reckoning was supposed to come before our one true Messiah died, so a new leader took over. After that, my father stopped attending altogether, but my mother stayed. This caused a huge rift in my family. My father was always looking for answers and he did not think this new leader could provide them. So now the cult considered him to be a heretic and my mother became very worried. She even called Worldwide and snitched on him for some contraband that he had in the house. There were certain things that we were just not allowed to have. No lavish possessions, no makeup, no satanic music or movies, which according to the church was essentially all media. So representatives from the church would come to our house and check our possessions, and there was an intervention with my father, and this caused a lot of tension in the household. By the time I was born in 1991, there was a lot that had changed in the church. With Joseph DeKoch running things, there was a committee formed in 1992 to go over all the Armstrong teachings, and ultimately they came to the conclusion that he was full of shit. So in 1993, the church changed their tone. They ditched Armstrongism and went mainstream. This was huge, and over half of the followers left. We actually stayed, but we felt confused and tricked, and ultimately very betrayed. But after a while, in 1995, we left too. My mom eventually found her faith in the Pentecostal church, and of course my dad hated mainstream theology, so he warned her that this was a huge mistake. She didn't listen, and the marriage definitely suffered. I was 4 years old when we completely stopped attending, so of course I don't remember much, except one thing that's burned into my memory. During one of our children's classes, we were being taught the lesson about the power of the Almighty God. Our teacher had a little egg to help her with her demonstration, and it had a happy little smiley face drawn on with Sharpie to help symbolize the egg represented us, God's loyal servants. Her representation of God in this sophisticated demonstration was the palm of her hand. She told us that God was all-powerful, and at any moment, if he were to choose, he could punish us for all our sins. And then smash, the egg is crushed under the weight of God's wrath. A mixture of eggshells, tears, and yolk runs down my face. I'll never forget how that made me feel so small and weak and powerless, and from that day on, the fear of God was imprinted on my mind. But that's pretty much all I remember. Since my knowledge of this time in my family's history is so limited and tainted, I decided to do some investigative journalism. I got on the phone with every member of my family to ask them some questions. What I expected was a shocking account of a terrible time in their lives, but instead I got a pros and cons of being in a cult. First I spoke with my mother, and overall she's happy that she found God, and although her marriage was loveless and full of disappointment, she's really happy that she got 4 kids out of the deal. Growing up, I never saw my parents hug or kiss or show any signs of affection at all. They didn't even sleep in the same room. And growing up without any sort of role model to show me what real love was really like, it really messed with my future relationships. I've had to learn for myself the hard way what love really is, and all my siblings struggled with this as well. But having 4 kids, they decided to stay together and raise us and just kind of do their own thing. They thought that this would be better for us, but it wasn't. Now that they're grown up, they're finally divorced, but both in their late 60s, I doubt they'll have a real chance of finding true love, but honestly, I don't think they want to. Next, I talked to my siblings. Again, I was shocked to hear mostly positive things. They all loved the sense of community that the church brought them. They all had friends there and they were excited to see them every week. They also loved the feasts. Every year there was 2 mandatory feasts. These were like big vacations with long sermons and potluck dinners and stuff like that. Although they were fun, they were also very expensive. They were a part of our tithe. Any normal church encourages their congregation to tithe 10% of their income. We were expected to pay that 10% and another 10 on top of that to save throughout the year to spend at these feasts. 20% of your income is a lot of money for a low-income family of 4, so we were forced to live on hand-me-down clothings and to cut corners wherever we could. I really hated being poor and not being able to get the new toys and the cool clothes that the other kids at school had. And to this day, I'm resentful of the Worldwide Church of God for taking so much money from all of its naive followers. Most of the negative effects that me and my siblings felt came later on in our lives. The biggest being this constant feeling of being an outsider. We were alienated from the rest of society. We had no extended family, and at school we always felt like we were the other. We ate foods that other kids didn't. We would have to leave the room when they would play Christmas movies, and we didn't have that nice, happy family we saw all the other kids with. The other downside could be looked at maybe as an upside as well. With the constant talk of the upcoming apocalypse, and then the realization that it wasn't coming at all, we were forced at a very young age to contemplate the very nature of our existence. Maybe that's a good thing, but it's a lot of stress to put on a child. But it's led to my siblings and I finding our own paths in life, whether they be religious or just spiritual. Finally, I spoke with my dad. He refuses to refer to Worldwide as a cult at all, because he feels like nobody was forced to drink the Kool-Aid. We were all there by our own free will and nobody was stopping us from leaving. He didn't agree with everything Armstrongism taught, but he did agree with a lot of aspects about it. Once he stopped attending the church, he still studied the Bible a lot. He even formed a group of former Worldwide members to meet regularly for a Bible study. He would hold these meetings in hotels all over the place, and he would drag me along with him, and I remember sitting through these boring, long PowerPoint presentations, and I absolutely hated it. Eventually, those meetings stopped, and he explored other methods of finding his way to the truth. He tried things like alchemy and reading Buddhism texts and even learning ancient Hebrew. And to this day, he's still looking for the answers, like most of us are. I didn't even find out that the church was a cult until my early 20s, and it really messed me up when I found out. How could nobody have told me this? And how could I not see it for myself? We essentially worshipped Herbert Armstrong, and he used fear to control us to help him grow his influence and ultimately gain a huge financial benefit. I felt like my family had kept me in the dark for all of these years, and I felt betrayed. It made me re-examine my whole life through a new lens. This feeling of being other that my siblings described and I felt so deeply finally made sense. My parents' torn relationship didn't seem so confusing anymore. And my one memory of egg on my face no longer seemed so out of place. I think the reason I feel so horrible about all this, and my family has lots of positive feelings about it, is timing. I was just born at the wrong time. I came into it at the height of confusion in the church, major tension between my parents, and not having lots of money in the family from 3 previous kids and years of just getting by. I got none of the good stuff. I didn't have friends at church. I didn't remember the fun feast trips and the big potluck dinners. I didn't learn how to philosophize about the nature of existence or how to explore my place in the world. I just got an egg all over my face and an expert class in being an outsider. Not only was my family in a cult, but because of my father's heretic ways, we were outsiders to them. And because of my place in the family, I felt like an outsider 3 times removed. And I'm still healing from this and learning what it all means to me, but for now, I'm really glad that I did this exploration. It's answered a lot of questions for me, and I've come to grips with a lot of it. So that's it, guys. Thanks for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the story, and if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. But for now, thanks for hanging out, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.